maths, we're going to concentrate on something else that we saw yesterday in the Numberblocks episode, Double Trouble. So we learnt about doubles, didn't we? Can we remember those quickly? We had a go this morning on the number line. What's double one? Shout it out. Double one, one. It's two. What's double two? Should you get four? Two twos. 2 and 2, 4. What about double three? 3 and 3, 6. So remember, double is when you've got the same number 2 times. Now, we're going to talk about something called half today. Now, we're going to talk about it first of all by using different things so we can look at what a half is. Now, I wonder, if you got a piece of paper, could you show me what half a piece of paper would look like? How could you find half of this piece of paper? Have a go first, and then come back. Have you had a go? So this is my whole piece of paper, but I could make it turn into halves by folding it carefully in half. And to fold a piece of paper or card in half, got to line up the edge very carefully, and then fold it all the way down. So I folded my paper in half. Just going to cut it down the middle on that line very carefully. And now I can say this piece is half of the piece of paper I had before. So when we started, we had a whole piece of paper. So this one whole thing here, the whole thing, just one. And then when we cut it in half, we end up with 2 halves of paper. So we've got 2 halves that make 1 whole. So that's 1 half of my piece of paper. Now it's a half because both pieces that we've got are exactly equal. They're exactly the same size. Can you see that? If I had done it like this, here's my hole, here's another piece of paper. So if I had done it like this, so whole, and I cut it in half. So when I cut that one in half, I had 2 pieces. If I cut this in half, look, there's 2 pieces. But have I cut it in half? What do you think? No, because they're not the same size. So a half has to be, whatever you started with whole, has to be exactly half, and that you get 2 of them that would make exactly the same length and width and size. Does that make sense? So I've cut my piece of paper in half that way, and look, you end up with 2 halves, don't you? So you need, there's 1 half, there's 2 halves. When you put them together, you make the whole thing again. Now I've cut it and had my halves look this way. Here's another piece of paper. Is there another way that I could cut this in half so it would be exactly in half? Got any ideas? Have a think, have a go, and then come back. Well, instead of folding it that way, I could fold it the other way so long as I line it up very carefully. Right along the edge. Right along the edge. And then crease it down. And I folded my whole piece of card. I folded it into 2 equal parts. That is the same as that. So let's cut it out and prove it. So I started with a whole piece of paper, 1 whole piece of paper, and I folded it and cut it into 2 equal halves. Let's see, exactly the same. So they are a half. I'm going to have a go with some Play-Doh now to see if I can create something and cut that in half. Do you think you can do that? Right, so there's my Play-Doh. It's actually already in a shape, isn't it? I might just use this one. So I'm going to cut it in half. Now I could cut it that way, or I could cut it down that way. So I'm going to cut it down the middle here. Down the middle, and make sure that there's the same amount that side and the same amount that side. So we start with one whole piece of plasticine, and I'm going to cut it in half, and then I get two bits here, one half and another half here, and they are the same amount, they're equal. So there was my whole piece of Play-Doh, and then I've cut them into two equal halves. Should we do it with some food? Hey Charlie, would you like half of my cake? Look, actually, knowing how to put things into half will actually make me a good friend. So I've only got one friend. So let's cut. So you have half and I have half. Right, Charlie. So it was a whole and I've cut it into two pieces. You can have that bit and I can have that bit. Is that right? What do you mean it's not fair? Why is it not fair? It's still two pieces. I had a whole piece. There's the whole cake, and then I cut it into two. We found out that you have two halves. They're not equal. Sorry, Charlie. I wasn't being a good friend. Hang on, let me put my cake back together. Now, where is it going to be exactly half? Oh, I reckon about there. Is that more fair, Puffins? So we get the same equal amount. Have a go in your house and see if there's different things that you can find half of. Now when you've done that, we're going to think about now halves of numbers. Now in that double trouble episode, the number blocks had to double up, didn't they? So double 1 became 2 to get through to the tunnel, and double 2 became 4, and then number 4 doubled up to become 8. But when they came out of the tunnel, they had to do the opposite. They had to cut themselves almost in half, didn't they? They had to share themselves into equal pieces. So let's start by having a look at number 2. Here's the number 2. Do you know what half of 2 is? To find out, we would have to split number 2 into 2 equal piles. So there's one there and one there. So half of 2 equals 1. I can prove that with marshmallows. If I have 2 marshmallows, like we did to start with, and Charlie, would you like some marshmallows? I bet you would. Where are you? Here he is. Let's share them between me and Charlie. So 1 for Charlie, 1 for me. Half of 2, because we start with 2, is 1. Do you get that? Now, that means you know 2 things now. You know that double 1 equals 2, and then half of 2 equals 1. So doubling and half is the opposite of each other. So if you know that double 1 makes 2, you also know that half of 2 is 1. Let's have a go with number 3. So let's put number 3 into half. Can we do it? Let's find out. So we're going to have 2 piles. 1 for you, Charlie. 1 for me. 1 for you. Oh, there's none left. How many did Charlie get? Got 2. How many did I get? 1. So can we put 3 into 2 equal piles? No. So we can't actually put number 3 into half. And if you think about it, we can't think of a double that we actually made that made number 3 when we talk about whole numbers. Because actually when we did double 1, we got to 2. But when we doubled 2, it missed out poor number 3. And we got 4. Now, without working it out, I wonder if you can find out or know what would be half of number 4. What do you reckon? Do you know what you have to double to make number 4? Let's see. So half of 4, so I'm going to share it out equally. 1 for you, Charlie, 1 for me. 1 for you, Charlie, and 1 for me. How many do we get each? Charlie gets 1, 2, I get 1, 2, and they're both the same in the piles, aren't they? That's equal, that's fair. So half of 4 is 2. But we know that double 2, if we had 2 2s, 2 and 2, makes 4. Now we can prove that with the marshmallows. Let's start with 4 marshmallows. Let's share the marshmallows into half, so we share them between Charlie and me. 1 pile, and then my pile, back to Charlie's pile, back to my pile. We both get 2 each. So half of 4 is 2. And then if we double 2, so 2 and 2, we get 4. Now, do you reckon you could spend some time now finding out halves of some of the other number blocks up to 10, and also find out which numbers don't have halves of whole numbers? Good luck.